Hello everybody. Today Hani is going to read Matilda by Ronald Dahl and illustrated by Quentin Blake. Chapter 4 The Ghost. There were pervasive calm in the Wormwood house for about a week after the superglue episode. The experience had clearly chastened Mr. Wormwood, and he seemed temporarily to have lost his taste for boasting and bullying. Then suddenly he struck again. Perhaps he had a bad day at the garage and did not sold enough crummy second-hand cars. There are many things that make a man irritable when he arrives home from work in the evening, and a sensitive wife will usually notice the storm signals and will leave him alone until he simmers down. When Mr. Wormwood arrived back from the garage that evening, his face was dark as a thundercloud, and somebody asked clearly for the high jump pretty soon. His wife recognized the signs immediately and made himself scarce. Then he strolled into the living room. Matilda happened to be curled up in an armchair in the corner, totally absorbed in a book. Mr. Wormwood switched on the television. The screen lit up. The program blared. Mr. Wormwood glared at Matilda. She hadn't moved. She had somehow trained herself now to block her ears by the ghastly sound of the dreaded box. She kept right on reading, and for some reason this infuriated the father. Perhaps his anger was intensified because he saw her getting pleasure from something that was beyond his reach. "Don't you ever stop reading?" he stamped at her. "Oh, hello, Daddy," she said pleasantly. Did you have a good day?" "What is this trash?" he said, snatching the book from her hands. "It isn't trash, Daddy. It's lovely. It's called The Red Pony. It's by John Steinbeck, an American writer. Why don't you try it? You'll love it." "Filch," Mr. Wormwood said. "If it's by an American, it's certain to be filch. That's all they write about." "No, Daddy, it's beautiful. Honestly, it is. It's about—" I don't want to know what it's about," Mr. Wormwood barked. "I'm fed up with your reading, anyway. Go and find yourself something useful to do." With frightening suddenness, he now began ripping the pages out of the book in handfuls and throwing them in the waste paper basket. Matilda froze in horror. His father kept going. He seemed little doubt that the man felt some kind of jealousy. "How dare she?" he seemed to be saying each rip of the page. "How dare she enjoy reading books when he couldn't? How dare she?" "That's your library book," Matilda cried. "It doesn't belong to me. I have to return to Mrs. Phelps." "Then you'll have to buy another one, won't you?" the father said, still tearing up pages. "You'll have to save your pocket money until there's enough for the kitty to buy a new one for their precious little Mrs. Phelps, won't you?" With that, he dropped the now empty covers of the book into the basket and marched out of the room, leaving the telly blaring. Most children in Matilda's place would have burst into floods of tears. She wouldn't do this. She sat there very still and white and thoughtful. She seemed to know that either crying or skulking ever get anyone anywhere. "The only sensible thing to do when you're attacked is, as Napoleon once said, a counterattack." Matilda's wonderfully stubborn mind was already at work deserving another suitable punishment for the poisonous parent. The plan that was now beginning to hatch in her mind depended, however, upon whether or not Fred Parrot was really good as a talker as Fred made out. Fred was a friend of Matilda's. He was a small boy of 6 who lived around the corner from her, and for days he had been going on about the great talking parrot his father had given him. So the following afternoon, as soon as Mrs. Wormwood had separated from her car for another session of bingo, Matilda set off for Fred's house to investigate. She knocked on the door and asked if he could be kind to show her the famous bird. Fred was delighted and led her up to his bedroom where a truly magnificent blue and yellow parrot sat in a tall cage. "There it is," Fred said. "Its name is Chopper." "Make it talk," Matilda said. "You can't make it talk," Fred said. "You have to be patient. I'll talk when it feels like it." They hung around waiting. Suddenly the parrot said, "Hello, hello, hello." It was exactly like a human voice. Matilda said, "That's amazing. What else can you say?" "Rattle my bones," the fairy said, giving a wonderful imitation of a spooky voice. "Rattle my bones." "He's always saying that," Fred told her. "What else he can say?" Matilda asked. "That's about it," Fred said, "but it's pretty marvelous, don't you think?" "It's fabulous," Matilda said. "Will you lend him to me just for one night?" "No," Fred said, "certainly not." "I'll give you all my next week's pocket money," Matilda said. That was different. Fred thought about a few seconds. "All right then," he said, "if you promise to return him tomorrow." Matilda staggered back to her own empty house, carrying the tall cage in both hands. There was a large fireplace in the dining room, and she now set about wedging the cage up the chimney and out of sight. It wasn't so easy, but she managed it in the end. "Hello, hello, hello," the bird called down for her. "Hello, hello." "Shut up, you nut," Matilda said, and she went out to wash her suit off her hands. That evening, while Mother and the father and brother and Matilda were having supper as usual in the living room in front of the television, a voice came loud and clear from the dining room across the hall. "Hello, hello, hello," it said. "Harry!" cried the mother, turning white. "There's someone in the house. I heard a voice." "So did I," the brother said. Matilda jumped up and switched off the telly. "Shh," she said. "Listen." They all stopped eating and sat there very tense, listening. "Hello, hello, hello," came the voice again. "There it is," cried the brother. "It's burglars," hissed the mother. "They're in the dining room." "I think they are," the father said, sitting tight. "Then go and catch them, Harry," hissed the mother. "Go and collar them red-handed." The father didn't move. He seemed to be in no hurry to dash off and be a hero. His face had turned gray. "Get on with it," hissed the mother. "They're probably after the silver." The husband wiped the lift nervously from his napkin. "Why don't we all go and look together?" he said. "Come on, then," the brother said. "Come on, Mom." "There's definitely in the dining room," Matilda whispered. "I'm sure they are." The mother grabbed the poker from the fireplace. The father took a golf club that was standing in the corner. The brother seized a table lamp, ripping the plug out of its socket. Matilda took the knife she had been eaten with, and all four of them crept forward to the dining room door, the father keeping well behind the others. "Hello, hello, hello," came the voice again. "Now on," Matilda cried and burst into the room, brandishing her knife. "Stick them up," she yelled. "We've caught you." The others followed her, waving their weapons. Then they stopped. They stared around the room. There was no one there. "There's no one here," the father said, greatly relieved. "I heard him, Harry," the mother shrieked, still quaking. I distinctly heard the voice. So did you." "I'm certain I heard him," Matilda cried. "He's here somewhere." She began searching behind the sofa and behind the curtains. Then came the voice once again, soft and spooky this time. "Rattle my bones," he said. "Rattle my bones." They all jumped, including Matilda, who was a pretty good actress. They stared around the room. There was no one there. "It's a ghost," Matilda said. "Heavens help us!" cried the mother, clutching her husband around the neck. "I know it's a ghost," Matilda said. "I've heard it here before. This room is haunted. I thought you know that." "Save us!" the mother screamed, almost throwing her husband. "I'm getting out of here," the father said, grayer than ever now. They all fled, slamming the door behind them. That the next afternoon, Matilda managed to get a rather silly and grumpy parrot down from the chimney and out of the house without being seen. She carried it through the back door and ran it all the way to Fred's house. "Did it behave itself?" Fred asked her. "We had a lovely time with it," Matilda said. "My parents adored it." Arithmetic. Matilda longed for her parents to be good and loving and understanding and honorable and intelligent. The fact that they were none of these things were something she had to put up with. It was not easy to do so. But the new game she had invented of punishing one or both of them each time they were bitterly to her made her life more and less bearable. Being very small and very young, the only power Matilda had over someone in her family was brain power. For sheer cleverness, she could run rings around them all. But the fact remained that any 5-year-old girl in the family was always obliged to do as she was told, however assigned the orders might be. Thus, she was always forced to eat her evening meals out of TV dinner trays in front of the dreaded box. She always had to stay alone in weekday afternoons, and whenever she was told to shut up, she had to shut up. Her safety valve, the thing that prevented from her going around the bend, was the fun of devising dishes out of despondent punishments, and the lovely thing that was they seemed to work, at any rate for short periods. The father in particular became less croaky and unbearable for several days after receiving doses of Matilda's magic medicine. The parrot in the chimney for quite definitely cooled both parents down a lot, and for over a week they were comparably civil to their small daughter. But alas, it couldn't last. The next flare-up came this evening in the sitting room. Mr. Wormwood had just returned from the work. Matilda and her brother were sitting quietly on the sofa, waiting for their mother to bring the TV dinners on a tray. The television had not yet been switched on. In came Mr. Wormwood in a loud check suit and a yellow tie. This a plain broad orange and green checkered of the jacket trousers almost blinded the onlooker. He looked like a low-grade bookmaker dressed up for her daughter's wedding, and he was clearly very pleased with himself this evening. He sat down in an armchair and rubbed his hands together and addressed his son in a loud voice. "Well, my boy," he said, "your father's had the most successful day. He's a lot richer tonight than he was this morning. He sold no less than 5 cars, each one of a tidy profit, sawdust in the gearboxes, electric drill on the speedometer cables, a splash of paint here and there, and the new few other clever little tricks the idiots were all falling over themselves to buy." He fished a bit of paper from his pocket and studied it. "Listen, boy," he said, addressing the son and ignoring Matilda. "Seeing as you'll be going into this business with me one day, you've got to know how to add up the profits you make at the end of each day. Go and get yourself a pad and pencil and let's see how clever you are." The son obediently left the room and returned with the writing materials. "Write down these figures," the father said, reading from his bit of paper. "Car number 1 was bought by me for £278 and sold for £1,425. Got that?" The 10-year-old boy wrote the two separate amounts down slowly and carefully. "Car number 2," the father went on, "cost me £118 and sold for £760. Got it?" "Yes, Dad," the son said. "I've got that." "Car number 3 cost £111 and sold for £999.50. Say that again," the son said. "How much did it sell for?" £999 and 50 pence, the father said, and that, by the way, another of my nifty little tricks to diddle the customer. Never say £1,000. Always say 999.50. It sounds much less, but it isn't. Clever, is it? Very, the son said. You're brilliant, Dad. Current number 4 cost £86, a real wreck was, and full sold for £699.50. Not too fast, the son said, writing the numbers down. Right, I've got it. Car number 5 cost £637 and sold for $1,649.50. You've got all these figures written down, son? Yes, Daddy, the boy said, crouching over his pad and carefully writing. Very well, the father said. Now work out the profit I made on each of the 5 cars and add up the total. Then you'll be able to tell me how much money your rather brilliant father made altogether today. It's a lot of sums, the boy said. Of course it's a lot of sums, the father answered. But when you're in a big business like I am, you've got to be hot stuff at arithmetic. I've practically got a computer inside my head. It took me less than 10 minutes to work the whole thing out. You mean you did it in your head, Dad? The son said, goggling. Well, not exactly, the father said. Nobody could do that. But it didn't take me long. When you're finished, tell me you think my profit was for the day. I've got the total written down here, and I'll tell you if you're right. Matilda said quietly that you made exactly £4,303 and 50 pence altogether. Don't bother in, the father said. Your brother and I are busy with the high finesse. But Dad... Shut up, the father said. Stop guessing and trying to be clever. Look at your answer, Dad, Matilda said gently. If you're done, it right out to be £4,303 and 50 pence. Is that right you got, Dad? The father glanced down at the paper in his hand. He seemed to be stiffened. He became very quiet. There was a silence. Then he said, Say that again. £4,303.50, Matilda said. There was another silence. The father's face was beginning to go dark red. I'm sure it's right, Matilda said. You little cheat, the father suddenly shouted, pointing at her with his finger. You looked at my bit of paper. You read it off when I've written here. Daddy, I'm the other side of the room, Matilda said. How could I possibly see it? Don't give me that rubbish, the father shouted. Of course you looked. You must have looked. No one in the world could give the right answer just like that, especially a girl. You're a little cheat, Mother. That's what you are, a cheat and a liar. At the point, the mother came in carrying a large tray on which there was 4 suppers. This time it was fish and chips, which Mrs. Wormwood had picked it up in the fish and chip shop on her way home from bingo. It seemed that bingo afternoons left her so exhausted that both physically and emotionally that she never had enough energy to cook an evening meal. So it wasn't the TV dinners, it had to be fish and chips. What are you looking so red in the face about, Harry? She said as she put down the tray on the coffee table. Your daughter is a cheat and a liar, the father said, taking his plate of fish and placing on his knees. Turn the telly on and let's have any more talk.